This video is brought to you by America First Insight. Help support the growing conservative movement by becoming a member today. And if you want to support this channel, you can also use the code REAL when becoming a member. Thank you and enjoy the video. As most of you probably know, there was a special election that occurred in the great state of Tennessee last night. And if I'm being completely honest, I think these results were a mixed bag for the Republican Party and really Democrats also. Now, I should be clear about this. I still think the results, they weren't good for the GOP, far from it. But despite all the hype, despite everyone saying the race was going to be very close, or in fact, some people convinced themselves Democrats were going to actually win. Yeah, that's real, by the way. There were a bunch of people that claimed Democrats were going to win because Orange Man bad. Well, after all of that, the final result is R+9. Yeah, all that hype, all that bullshit, and you lost by 9? Now, to be fair, this is a good showing for a Republican seat. In fact, it's very good. It swung, what, 13, 14 points to the left? So yeah, it was a good night for Democrats, but they expected way more. They were hyping this up so much, and Republicans were panicking. They were saying, it's over, we're gonna possibly lose. And our House majority would be all but dead before even 2026, because you lose this seat, you already got to deal with people like Thomas Massie, Don Bacon, MTG in the House, and now your already slim majority gets even slimmer. The House majority would have been all but dead. So yeah, that's why both sides, they were putting a lot of resources into this race, and at the end of the day, it just wasn't that close. Now, for the district standards, yeah, this is a very close race. Republicans, they usually win it by 20 or 25 points. And that's the major problem for Republicans. Yes, they won it by 9, but they should have won this race by a wider margin. Now, to be fair, Republicans, they were expected to lose some ground for 2 reasons. One, this is a lower turnout election. And I've said this a million times now, but for those that don't know, the Republican Party, they're the party of low propensity voters, meaning these voters, they don't vote. They might vote for a president. They might, in a best case scenario, vote in a midterm. But these other elections, for special elections, for off year races, they basically never vote. Democrats, meanwhile, they're the party of high propensity voters. They want low turnout because the less people that vote, the more Democrat the environment is. And with it being a special election, yeah, you're going to see much lower turnout. And funny enough, actually, this race actually did have pretty high turnout, especially on election day, which is the reason why this race wasn't as close as Democrats thought it was going to be. The turnout wasn't that bad. Like, yeah, it's bad compared to last year, but still, it's not 10 people voted and that's it. No, it was a very high turnout for a special election, but still, you would expect the race to swing a couple points because of that. And on top of that, this is with President Trump in the White House. And 95% of the time, the party in power, they tend to do awful, or not awful, but just worse in these races because the opposing party is more motivated. They're more enthusiastic to vote. So yeah, you would expect some slippage by 5 points, but it wasn't just by 5. It was by what, 15, 12? That's not good. That's a 12-point shift. So that's the problem. Republicans, they should have won this race by at least 15 because the turnout wasn't as bad as we thought it was going to be. And yeah, Trump is underwater, but that should account for a 5-point swing. Maybe like an 8-point shift in a worst case scenario. Not a borderline 15-point swing. That's not good. But at the same time, with everything surrounding the race, Democrats still, they did not reach expectations. They still underachieved. And that's the weird part about this race. Republicans did not do good because we're talking about Trump plus 20. But at the same time, neither did Democrats. Democrats actually did not have the showing they wanted to have. They wanted to have a race within 2 points or hell, just win the race outright. And that would be a really good night for them. But they didn't. So that's the weird part about this race. Yeah, Republicans, they underperformed compared to last year. But funny enough, Democrats, they set such a high bar for themselves, and they failed to reach it. So that's the problem for them. Now, how does this affect next year? If I'm being completely honest, I don't think this really shows much for next year at all. It really doesn't. Like I said yesterday, the only two scenarios where the results last night would really demonstrate how good or bad next year could be for the Republican Party is if either they just lost the race or they won it by 30. That's like the only way you could get any kind of real, any kind of like feeling for next year. And we really didn't. It was kind of in the middle where, yeah, it was bad for Republicans, but with it being lower turnout, with it being a special election, with Democrats spending everything on this race, hyping it up so much, you expected more from them. So this really doesn't tell us anything except, yet again, the Republican Party, they are the party of low propensity voters. They're voters, they just don't vote. But when they do, they win easily. But funny enough, last night we did see something very, if you're the Republican Party, really good occur. Because in the early vote, the Democrat was reaching her benchmark everywhere. Bine, however you want to say her name, she was running up everywhere in the early vote. And that's why the betting markets, they swung so far against Republicans that there was a chance Republicans could actually lose. That's how bad the early vote was. Because you translate that to election day votes, it would not be enough for Epps to win. But then the election day vote occurred, and that changed everything. Republicans were expected to win this vote, yes, but the margin they won it by and how many people voted, that stunned everybody. You not only had way higher turnout than expected on election day, but also the margin was basically identical to what happened in 2024. Yeah, the margin for the election day vote was basically identical to what it was just last year. In a lower turnout election, where Republicans are the party of low turnout, their voters are low propensity, they might vote once in a while. Despite that handicap, they actually did very good on election day. They exceeded all the benchmarks, and that's how you ended up with R+9. Which seems very strange, by the way, because you don't usually see that. Because, like, with election day votes, we know the Republicans, they tend to do way better with them. Everybody knows that. Democrats, they do better in the early vote. But most of the time, especially with these special elections, if Republicans are doing way worse in one of the vote types, they tend to do worse with both of them. So if they do worse with early votes, they tend to do a bit worse with election day, and vice versa. But the opposite occurred, where Republicans, they basically got election day turnout, or not turnout, but the margins were basically identical to election day of last year. Democrats, meanwhile, they ran it up in the early vote. They absolutely ran it up in the early vote by a massive margin across the district. That doesn't usually happen. You don't see these vote types swing the polar opposite like that. Sometimes it does occur, but most of the time, especially with lower turnout races, they tend to be in line with the swings. Like if one shifts 10 points to the left, you expect the other one to vote basically the same, swing-wise. But it didn't. And I think I know why. Because Republicans for the first couple of weeks in November, when early voting started, they did nothing about this race. They ignored it. They spent no money and time on it. They spent nothing on Tennessee 7th. And that's when Democrats began to pick up momentum. The ground game was overwhelming. Republicans were asleep at the wheel yet again. And that's when the polls began to drop of Democrats winning the race, potentially. And that's when Republicans began to realize, oh, wait a minute, we have a huge problem. And that's when they began to activate the base. That's when they began to have larger operations down there. And then President Trump himself got back on Twitter. And I know that doesn't seem like that big of a deal, but think about this. President Trump was off Twitter all this time. not using it for whatever reason. I mean, you have access to hundreds of millions of people for free, by the way, and you're not going to use that platform? Why? It's stupid. It's a waste of time. But then he began in the later stage of early voting in Tennessee, he began to talk about it basically daily and got the word out even more. And on election day, he did the same thing. He told people to get out and vote. And on paper, this doesn't seem like that big of a deal. Like, well, who cares? Like, well, yeah, Trump says this all the time. The difference is, before Trump did this and Republicans started to actually do stuff, they were falling behind. And the early vote indicated, yeah, the early vote was not looking good for the Republicans at all. We're talking about, if the same swing occurred on election day, Republicans would have lost by a big margin. They would have gotten killed, which is just insane to think about. But then, the millisecond Trump talks about this race, the millisecond Republicans get off their ass and do something, magically, you see the results change almost immediately. Think about that. In 1 week, they shifted this race like 9 points. Just from 1 week of actually talking about it, of actually spending time and money on this race. That's just crazy to think about, because it's like, wait, you're telling me you can shift that much in a week? Well, yeah, because when a bunch of voters, they don't know an election's happening, they have no motivation to vote, what do you think's going to happen when you're the party of low propensity voters? And that's what happened. And this, in my opinion, should be a warning for the GOP and really a lesson for them. Don't wait till the last second to do this stuff. Don't wait till after the fact and, oh, wait, we're losing potentially. We got to spend everything on this race. No, don't do that. You have these voters that will vote. They may not be happy with Trump. They may have issues with this administration, the Republican Party, but they're not going to vote Democrat. You just got to get them out to vote. And that was a big problem in Virginia, New Jersey. And that's part of that was a shutdown. We know that now. But still, a bunch of Trump voters, they didn't care. They really didn't care about the races at all, because the ground game was also pretty bad in both those states. So, yeah, this should be a lesson for the GOP. You can win these races. Like, you proved it last night. You won it by 9 points. Yes, it's not good for you. But at the same time, the election day vote was so Republican that it was basically what it was back in 2024. Now imagine for a second, if they did this weeks prior, they started this operation back in early November, even late October. If they would have done that, I don't think they would have outran Trump of last year, but the early vote probably wouldn't have been that bad. And that's the issue. That's what's so frustrating. The Republicans demonstrate when they actually use their brain and actually do something, they can win these races by big margins, but they don't. They wait till the last second. They pour all their money in at the last millisecond when it's too late to really change much. And it really only worked in Tennessee 7th because of how Republican it is. And they were able to get a bunch of Trump voters out to vote on election day. If they would have started this back in November, back in October, we're talking about this. We're talking about like R plus 20. I'm not even exaggerating. If you could shift the election day vote that much in a week, imagine what would happen if you did this for a whole month. It's just so frustrating. Republicans have to get off their ass, do something. They have infinite money now. Trump has like, what, $3 billion in his war chest? Use some of that money. You have a formula that works. Don't wait till the last second. It's clear. You have infrastructure to win these races by big margins. You spent a week on this race and you won by 9 when you're about to lose. You shifted the race that much in a week just on the election day vote. Even the early vote, it did get a bit more Republican at the end of the day. So Republicans, they have to wake up on this. This has to be a wake-up call. Make them realize, don't wait till the last second. You should have learned your lesson back in Virginia. Because that was a big problem. A lot of their resources, they waited till the last millisecond to spend money. And I know you have the shutdown screwed things up. I get that. And Winsome Sears was a bad candidate. I get that. but you should have spent time and money way earlier. This has to be a wake-up call for the entire GOP. Anyways, folks, thank you so much for watching. If you guys did enjoy, smash the like button down below, subscribe, share with your friends, and of course, join the channel today. Godspeed to all of you.